Good evening, everyone. Back again for question time. It didn't quite seem a week since the last one. And yeah, nice work, Steve and Robert, the new cameraman, on that little introduction there. Well happy with that. Looks superb. So here we are, guys. We've got a couple of guests on this week again. Let's see what topics we've got to address. But Each Yorkshire's been on again today, and things are driving me crazy. Really need to slow down with that one, but it's good fun. Inspired by some of the results, we've been photographing some of the fish for Koi Talk magazine this week for part 2 of my Deutsche article in there. And yeah, the results just, they're mouth-watering. So it really is fueling the need to keep going with this one. And it's going to be one hell of a collection of fish raised in the next few years. So on top of that, I've just seen a really interesting video that I've actually shared on my personal Facebook page. Taro Kodama, great guy, Japanese in origin. So he's done an interview with Taniguchi-san about golden corn, and it's even filled a few blanks in for me. And I'd obviously put it together that it's been about 4 or 5 years to get to the point where he's sort of got to. Well, I've actually, if you haven't watched that video, it's actually been 12 years in the making, golden corn, from one simple vision that the guy had. And I just absolutely hats off to that, to have a vision in your head, then have the skill set and the ability to actually produce it. That's just superb, especially what he's tried to produce in creating and sort of stabilizing Kanoko as a trading fish. I mean, Kanoko was unpredictable things in koi for as long as I've been involved, and probably way before that. So if you get a chance, try and dig that video out. It's up on YouTube if you can get Kodama's channel, and I'd highly recommend a watch because super work there. So enough from me. Let's bring in our first guest. I believe this is a guy, hobbyist called Paul, who's actually coming in from Italy. Hi Paul, how are you doing?
Not too bad at all. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. Happy to have you.
It's really good to be able to pick the brains of somebody who's got so much experience. So thank you.
Yeah, right. So fire away then.
Well, actually, some of the queries I had, you pretty much put to bed in the previous question and answers and in the last Koi Talk, and it was all about soft water. Really, how important was it for koi growth? So I think you've put that to bed nicely. And with regards to water testing, maybe I'll probably try and be a little more careful with water, relax a bit more the rest of the year, maybe test a bit.
With you saying that, Paul, are you somebody who's just sort of had your head mashed by the whole soft water RO debate?
No, but I do come from indoor fish keeping and discus and imbuna, so totally opposite. But as you know, with discus, if you want to have good results, you have to have reasonably soft water. And I mean, to grow a discus to 6 or 7 inches, let alone the mythical 8. I mean, just to put things into perspective, to grow mine out, I used to have them in 100-gallon tanks, and I used to change a good 75 gallons of water each day, aged, warmed up to 30 degrees Celsius. Get 3/4 of the water out, wipe 4 sides of the tank and the bare bottom tank, and fill it up again every single day. And I used to actually feed. I used for a year and a half, 2 years. And I used to feed them on grated wild salmon. So, I mean, you can imagine, I don't know if you know, but still in discus keeping, it's common practice to basically stop.
I've sold discus in the past, absolutely.
So you know all about it. And on the other hand, Mbuna, Malawi Lake cichlids are a pain in the backside on the opposite end of the spectrum. They might be vegan or vegetarian, but they are aggressive little buggers, and getting them to all live together can be a bit tricky. I come from indoor water keeping, with when you're dealing with 100-gallon. You have to be careful because things can go south quite rapidly. On the other hand, you're shy of 10,000 UK gallon, and it's actually a breath of fresh air by comparison. Because koi, by comparison, if kept reasonably, are, you know, strong as tanks compared to these finicky little fish that you only have to look at them the wrong way and they turn turtle. So it's totally different. But no, I was saying, you know, probably just, I think, you know, my pond is not heated. At night it drops to about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. In the day it's going up to about 10. That's my
nice. Yeah.
So the concern is more, you know, springtime, Aramona sale, etc. So getting the filtration going up again, balancing, starting to feed them again. So obviously I'll start testing a bit more come springtime. I wanted to ask, do you have any particular advice for the spring period coming out of winter, with regards to, you know, feeding, balancing it with the filters coming up to speed and so forth?
Yeah, so I can't remember. I think it might be one of these question times. We sort of touched on this a little bit, but it is if you've got no heating, obviously it's a balancing act. And I get obviously the whole heating thing is going to rumble on and on and on. It's one of them things, you know, if you're wanting to invest in the hobby, that is the one for me straight away. It gives you the ultimate control over the environment and just eliminates the biggest chunk of problems that can potentially come. So, but obviously, with that out of the question, and obviously, you know, utility bills rising as they are doing and everything going off, I imagine that's going to get further and further away for a lot of people. So, I think it's a very, very fine balance. Not pulling covers off too easy, because obviously they're going to give you some stability. The nighttime temperatures being the big one, obviously, because we get these gains in the day and the falls in the evening, and they really do cause havoc. But it's just being aware as well that the filter has got to wake up, as well as, you know, the fish's immune system's got to wake up. Food's probably one of the biggest ones. First of all, you know, not to go too heavy. It's quite easy to get the sun shining on the pond. It lifts a couple of degrees in the day, and all of a sudden you're chucking food at them like crazy. And your filter's just not ready to cope with that. You know, even in summer, you know, feeding needs to be a gradual adjustment in order for the filter to catch up with it. So even more so at that time of year when everything's sat dormant, before you know it, you can have an ammonia spike, which is going to hit them 10 times harder. You know, when the fish are sat in the cold. So that's the big one, because it's all just trying to avoid the things that can set problems off and cause problems. So obviously keeping a maintenance regime up even through winter, vitally important, and certainly, you know, coming out into spring. But just managing that water quality more than anything, you know, because it really can. If you get a big ammonia surge, before you know it, everything's just falling apart underneath, and that's when your bacterial problems can start, and all the rest of it from there. And then the other bit is just being on the ball with the parasites. You know, fish parasite, they're a part of koi keeping. You know, they're there, and when there is instability, they're there even more so. As you know.
So connected to this, what time would you really like the pond water to come up to before you start introducing new fish, quarantined and everything? Would you wait until the water's about 16, 17 at least?
No, as you see, for me, introducing new fish, my concern introducing new fish. So when the water is cooler, it's a better time for moving fish. They're a lot hardier and easier to introduce into a new environment. So I have no issue with them going into cold water. The problem we've got is when there's no heating involved, if the fish moves and everything's successful, it'll just join the others and it'll settle down. If it doesn't, however, and it's quite normal that when fish move from one environment to another, it can knock them back as they're adjusting to parameters. There could be, you know, some sort of bacterial viral load in the water that fish is not used to, but all the current residents are. That hits a new fish like a ton of bricks. So it's got to adapt to that. Now, when the water's 18 degrees and above, or in the 20s, you're probably not even going to see anything there. It might just be, you know, a day or so, not 100%. But the cooler and the further you move down to the cool end of the spectrum, they don't just bounce back from it. So you could end up with that new fish, you know, dropping into a deep sulk, being really unhappy. It's nothing to do with water. It's nothing to do with parasites. The only way of generally fixing something like that would be to increase the temperature, get the immune response, and potentially add salt in as well, just to give the osmotic system some support so they can overcome the illness without sinking too far into it, potentially dying.
Yep. Because I've actually got, I'm glad you confirmed my choice. I've got quite a nice Hoshikin Nisai on the way. I think that he's just coming out of quarantine now at my dealer. I said, I was explaining to Steve that the koi scene, he's quite different over here in as much as we don't actually, in Italy, as far as I'm aware, there's no equivalent of yourselves. There's actually no main.
Sorry, just to butt in, obviously, on what I've said. Yes. Yeah, you don't want to see someone comment. You wouldn't want to be bringing that fish out of warmth and bringing it down into cold quite rapidly, because that's just going to cause you mayhem. Going the other way, not so much of an issue, but of course, coming back, stay away from that one. If you're going cold to cold, happy days.
As I said, that my retailer anyway is on the other side of the other coast, just south of Rome, but more or less the same latitude. And I can always just ask him to basically turn the heater down in his quarantine, in the quarantine pond he's keeping my fish, and get them adapted to that temperature. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. No, as I said, quite glad, because this is quite a nice Hoshikin male 5-step Koaku.
Nice.
So I think Steve has got a video anyway. Oh, there you are. Mine's the 5-step, the Gondan. I didn't.
Nice.
On purpose. I had the pick of the choice. I didn't go for the biggest one because wasn't quite convinced about that body shape. What do you think?
Sorry, which one are we talking about?
Mine's the 5-step, the Godan.
Yeah, the one on the bottom at the minute.
The one on the bottom. The one on the left, the biggest one. I wasn't quite so convinced by the body shape. It seems quite fat in the middle and going quite thin towards the tail.
Are they all male fish?
They are all sent as male fish, although my retailer thinks that mine looks more female than male. He had a quick look at the vent at the bottom, but whatever.
I wouldn't agree with that. Just looking at its fins.
They should be. They're all being sold as male. So
rock on male. For me, the one I would have gone absolute, best looking body for everything there. For me, obviously, the one you're on about's got a bigger frame. The one at the top there. But probably looking, best body choice. The one at the top being male, that's carrying a really good weight, and obviously that belly line is not going to be a concern, because it's not going to egg up like a female. Although that body, that probably is a very questionable body. That it does look more female than male on that one. To be honest, the others I can see the male set in the frame, but they're both really good bodies. I probably overall would have gone for the fish that's in the middle now. To be honest, would have been my choice, but they're all great fish, and Hoshikin stuff grows phenomenally well, male, female. It does, and that there is just textbook Hoshikin pattern as well. He's a real master of the 4 steps, 5 steps, marathons, the whole lot is superb.
So I'm quite pleased about that. And and I've just then ordered another couple of oddball Nisai. I've got from Marusaka on the way. I've got a Kikusui and a Platina Doitsu.
Nice.
So those are also on the way. They should be about 50 centimeter thereabout.
Marusaka Kikisui are superb. So how do you do? It's your question time now. So how do you find obviously the hobby out in Italy? I'm sure everyone watching here in UK, how does it differ? Have you got many choice of dealers and products,
to put things into perspective, there's probably about under 10 main dealers nowadays. Quite a few. A couple have gone out of business, and as I said, there is no main wholesaler. So up until a couple of years ago, obviously they all used to go to Japan once or twice a year and source their own fish, which hasn't been happening nowadays. They have to rely on intermediaries managing one way or the other. The one I use is just south of Rome, because most of the main dealers tend to be, there's a couple of good ones around Tuscany, around Florence. There's another couple of good ones sort of Venice area, and otherwise you're looking at Milan. And there's another one up towards the Dolomites that's also very good, but that's about it. And then you don't get the kind of variety that you can get obviously with a wholesaler like yourself, you can afford to import 100 oddballs or whatever. While here, it does tend to be a lot. Obviously, the Dosanki and a few of the main varieties. My retailer, he managed to get about 4 or 5 of those Taniguchi Golden Corn. So we are getting some new stuff as well. But again, you're having to very much go on. Like the video that I showed you, that's the video that was sent from Japan, and it's I tell my retailer, this is what I'd like, see what you can find. He's got to then go through his intermediary and try and find something that will more or less fit the brief. But again, he's not going to stick his neck out that much.
No,
so it's not
very, very limited then compared to the choice we've got going on over here.
Absolutely. Other quick question.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the number of fish that you say you'd shot 500, 1,000 fish in a 3,500 gallon pond.
Yes.
Obviously, your filters are always fully cycled and permanently cycled.
Yeah.
Do you have to add sodium bicarbonate to feed these filters at all?
Yeah, absolutely. KH is the biggest parameter that we manage on site, because at the height of summer when everything's jacked up, we're maximum stock.
Going like the clappers. Yeah. So what KH do you normally keep?
Broke up then, Paul. Sorry, just repeat that for me.
Around what KH do you try to maintain?
6.
6. Okay.
We like to keep it at 6. We're around that. We're normally about 6 to 7 from the mains water anyway. And we just like to keep it above that. No need for going beyond. We're on it constantly. But ammonia burns. Sorry, not ammonia. Ammonia does burn. Yeah, KH, we burn it very, very quickly when everything is jacked up and working at its maximum. So when it really is the glue. And this was part of the whole sort of debate. Me and Chris, who does Koi Talk with me, we were speaking about it, and we look at the sort of RO thing and why I see our system performs when a KH starts hitting 2 is the absolute bare minimum. The minute you hit 2 and beyond, then below, that's when you start to see slides in other parameters. Primarily ammonia and nitrite, and before you know it, if that falls off a cliff, your pH becomes so vulnerable. It's not always likely just to crash, but does become vulnerable. But you certainly see that change in them parameters, and the pond just starts falling apart. So, I know the people running RO are saying, yeah, absolutely, they're running it at levels of 1 and 2, absolutely fine. Yes, it is, but you're constantly trickling that water. If you don't constantly trickle that water, it's game over. You're going to have exactly the same issues as everybody else, because when you've got that and it's stable, the filter in the environment will adjust to what's going on. But it's so dependent on that fresh water coming in my opinion, to make that whole system work. And it's too much interfering with nature for me.
Well, I mean, coming from discus, as you know, especially with wild discus, you sometimes you run practically pure RO, and you're running pHs of even below 6.
Yeah.
But that's a totally different ball game, and you have to be so careful, because you are literally on an edge. You have to drop it ever so slowly. You basically have to gradually evolve your bacteria to try and cope, gradually adjust to that lowering pH. You have to be ever so careful. So obviously that's a totally different ball game. But let's not digress.
No. But I think the big one for me with it all is there's just a bigger picture to the whole koi keeping game. And you can't ever just look at what someone's doing and isolate one thing.
Yeah.
If we look at the mud pond environment in Japan, which is sort of where this thought around the soft water come from, you cannot just dip a meter in there and go, the water's soft. That's why the fish are growing so big.
Yeah, but that's a lake. It's got so much mass. So this is it. We're talking that mass of water.
I broke down some of the figures on them mud ponds in the past, and we're talking one fish having in excess of 20,000 gallons of water, so even more in some cases for the summer. They've got absolute ideal temperatures. That they're eating, power foods all day, snails, worms, everything in the bottom of that pond. It's just a different beast. And even there, because of that water, a lot of the breeders are having to use fresh water coming into the mud pond constantly in order to keep that pond from falling apart and for them to get the maximum feeding levels into it, you know. So it's it's serious stuff. Yeah, you can't just look at that one thing. That's something to stress to everybody when they're analysing what other people are doing. That one thing alone. Just imagine a scenario where you're running RO, you're keeping really soft water, but you don't actually know how to feed fish properly. You've not got the right temperatures, and your filters can't cope when you do chuck food in. Absolutely pointless having the RO. So it's never just about the one thing.
Absolutely. I wanted to also ask, what do you think about clay and other additives for the pond? I mean, do you think they do any good, or basically, as you say, good food is the basis and anything else is just a bit of flannel?
The good food bit, absolutely paramount. But yeah, I do use clay quite regular. Mixed results with certain types. I was always a big fan of the Japanese Refresh. That just seemed a phenomenal product, seemed to work absolute wonders, but that is really, really hard to get hold of even over here these days, to be honest. And then, I mean, pretty much this year, mainly I've been using the Bacter Plus Mizu clay, which I've found to be really good. It's been quite effective at working the sumi, but just in general, especially in summertime, it creates a bit more turbidity in the water, you know, which is going to look after the fish's skin, as well as being a good thing for helping and promoting skin luster anyway. So yeah, I like using clay. Not too many other things, to be honest. There's so much out there that you're chucking in. There's a few good bacteria products that I've used in the past that are handy when you need them. Certainly handy for some sort of hobbyists as well, just improving things. But yeah, other than that, clays are great. You just don't need too many things to be chucking in there all the time.
Thanks. Just obviously looking again at your levels of stocking, and then on the other hand, reading on forums and stuff.
And
to Steve, I do go a lot on the American forum on Koi Fen, which is pretty vibrant. There's loads of people on it. A bit also on the UK Koi forum, but mostly on Koi Fen. And you do get some weird and wonderful ideas over there. We got this in discus as well, this phantomatic growth inhibiting hormone that's secreted by other fish. So if you're overstocking, that's actually what's keeping the size of the other fish down, which obviously doesn't seem to be happening in your ponds, because, you know, the level of stocking, and again, you said yourself, you don't change that much water. So you basically got those hundreds and hundreds of fish in a pond with not much water turnover. And obviously, if there was such a thing as a growth inhibiting hormone that was secreted by these fish, your fish would not be growing to such a prodigious extent as they are.
No.
I mean, just
well, it's not like they're not getting any fresh water. Obviously, they do, because the drum filter alone, with the amount of feeding, the drum filter is working hard. But we're not talking the crazy amounts here. It's a complete, everything I do is a complete contradiction to what most people say you need to do in order to get the results. There's just so much more to it. A big thing, you know, we talk about all this waste in the system, you know, although, you know, I'm not frantically changing lots of water, the drum filters are allowing waste to be taken out of the body of water constantly, which is the one thing I do love about drum filters. Constantly throughout the day, taking that waste and getting it out of the water body, so it's not there just developing into crazy organics that don't need to be there. And the fluid beds, you know, K1 fluid beds, something else, the reason I absolutely love them. They keep so clean. You know, we'll generally get in and service them once a year, but when we get down, there's nothing but a bit of dust down there, and you know, all that. It is a very clean system. It does keep well in that respect. Which helps it all. But again, you know, you can talk about as much as you want to, growth inhibiting hormones, soft water, wherever you want to do. The big one for me, if you're not getting obviously the growth, the temperatures, absolutely paramount. When you get the temperatures, you need to know how to feed them. And when you're feeding at the kind of levels, you know, that need to be done to get good growth and good development, you just need to be able to manage the water. And at times that comes with sacrificing clarity. You know, if you're stressing out about water clarity constantly, it's no good trying to raise fish, because there's got to be a give somewhere. And, you know, just heaping upon with that amount of food, that amount of stocking and all the rest of it, you can't keep crystal clear, you know, immaculate water. And for me, it's not something I fuss about.
Well, no, that's You know, that's just for decoration, basically. It's purely aesthetic. It's nothing to do with the actual, you know, conditions, what the fish need.
And interestingly, some of these environments perform better. Certainly the filters, you know, probably a lot of filters out there. Certainly when you look at K1 and the sort of loading it can take, they're not performing anywhere near at their best. You know, the strength of the biofilm and the efficiency. I think that goes very unmissed is how efficient the likes of K1 with that protected biofilm in the middle, how much that environment does for actually lowering DOCs by actually consuming organics on a level that drum filters can't even do. You know, taking that out of the water. It's a real phenomenal thing. You know, we've seen the rotifers, or you might have seen the rotifers when they created biochip. And apparently there's a degree of those in K1, you know, consuming particles on a microscopic level in some crazy volumes. So I do believe, you know, that filtration setup, certainly with the fluid beds, is a big part of the success of koi keeping in general these days. Yeah,
well, absolutely. As you say, it's not just a matter of the nitrifying bacteria, it's also all the other microorganisms.
So much more to it.
Biosystem, absolutely. Cool. Right. Also, talking about feeding, if you, again, as a pond keeper, I've got, you know, some fish that are, you know, 3 years old and nudging 60 centimeters, and I've still got a few, like you were saying, some cute little fish that I bought as Tosai last summer. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go on, just start again.
But they're still relatively, they haven't grown that much. I bought them when they were about 20 centimeters, and now they're maybe about 28 or so. But they're tiny little minnows compared to the bigger ones. Would you feed different size food, mix of floating and sinking, maybe some smaller sinking pellets for the little ones, so not to be harassed by the whales?
You see, I've never you can, but what you'll find, I don't know if you found this, I mean, the pattern of the feeding behavior can tend to go sort of one or two ways with them groups. Tosai are the real energetic feeders, so they can tend to get there before the bigger fish. And then, but obviously, as soon as the sort of bigger fish come in, it can tend to spook the smaller ones away. But all you'll find is, you know, if you've got dominant feeders in there, those dominant feeders will always find it to the food before everything else.
Well, I mean, I've got two big Karashi guys from Marseille, so obviously.
They will always get there. They'll find their way to assert the dominance and get that food before everything else. So if people's done these tricks, tried these tricks, personally, for me, I think you're wasting your time a little bit, because, you know, a Tosai can only consume so much. It's the system working against you, where you've got that mixed environment, as a lot of hobbyists do. It's just one of them things, unfortunately. But yeah, you could try. Your best bet to do anything would be to try sinking versus floating. But I think all you'll do is you'll find the same thing, that, you know, the Tosai can only take so much in. By that time, your Karashis are coming and cleared the rest up anyway. So it's the dominance that is the real problem there. But unfortunately, like I say, that just is what it is. So yeah, not too much you can do with it.
Fine. Another quick question is, I know
last one, Paul, by the way, we need to move on.
Okay, then I'll swap. I'm after one of the varieties that I would really like. Is Deutsche Lemon Hariwake. Not too keen on the Aoki ones, because I think they look a bit too much like Ayawakaba. More keen
they're not really
more keen on the Yamazaki ones. They seem quite nice. Now Yamazaki seems to have quite a, he produces a stunning array of varieties.
Yes, he does.
I think if I want to get at least a couple of these Hariwake, I'll probably have to order a whole box of Nisai from my retailer. So you're probably looking 8 or 9 Nisai. Besides the Hariwake, what would you have from Yamazaki?
Oh, that's a good question. What I have is Prachner are quite nice.
Also, I mean, considering he also has.
Well, just on the Hariwake thing, personally, I'd look at a Fuji.
Fuji.
A Fuji.
Oh, Fuji. Okay.
Fuji, or I don't know. You might know him. Fukusawa Koi Farm is the other name for him. But his Harawaki produce a stunning colour, got a really nice body line to him. But for me, over the years, they've probably had the best colour stability of all the Harawaki I've had my hands on. So yes, I've had Yamazakis, but growing Yamazakis has produced me a lot of Deutsche out of them, to be honest, over the years. It'll produce a slightly more vivid colour, typically from his lineage. The Fuji one tends to be a bit softer, but the overall shine, condition of them, and yeah, he gets some nice big examples as well. So I personally would look there, and then yeah, Fuji's really great at everything he produces, to be honest with you. Does some really nice Ochiba, Shisui, superb as well, nice Garomo. So if it is a case in your hands of order more fish, that's probably the place I look for, to be honest. His Kajaku were pretty exceptional as well.
Good tip. Thank you.
Magic. Brilliant. Well, it's been nice to talk to you, Paul. And
same here.
No doubt. Stay in touch with Steve, and no doubt if we've got a slot again at some point, we'll get you back on if you've got some more questions to fire through.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Good to speak to you.
Take care. Okay.
Cheers. Right, guys. Interesting to hear about what's going on in other countries out there, to be honest. So, yeah, next up, we've got one of my dealers that I work with. We've got Matthew Howe from Howie's Koi. It looks the tidiest I've ever seen him, to be honest, at the minute. He's just moved properties and he's currently building a new site, laying blocks like they've gone out of fashion. So, yeah, let's get him on and see what Matt wants to talk about. How are you doing, Matthew?
Hi, Ricky. I'm good, thank you. Well, long hours, dreaming blocks at the moment. I say we're up to over 2,000 blocks laid in the last week, and it's just relentless. I said on the last location that we wouldn't do it again, but yeah, we've decided to go bigger and better. We always
laying blocks was a big part of my childhood, and I've never gone back to it since.
Yeah, definitely. No, we set out a target that we were going to be bigger and better, and yeah, the opportunity arose and we've gone for it. So
fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing where you get with it, mate. Anyway, so are your questions today, or are they from your Facebook group?
Yeah, we got different questions actually. Some that have come in from the Facebook group, some that have come in from really questions that I've been asked in the past, and I want you to reinforce my response. So some of them may sound trivial, but it'd be nice for you to actually put your point over as well.
Yeah.
One of them is the spring and autumn preventative treatment.
Oh.
Yeah. In the poultry field, they don't give the option for poultry to catch, say, gapes, which is very similar to flukes. It's a dog that lives in the throat, and they treat as a preventative cause. Now, in the spring, which we're coming to now, obviously there's going to be a small number of potentially flukes. They're going to be at the all-time low. So as soon as we come up to 12 degrees, do we treat and eradicate the flukes and the Costia and the Trichodina?
Preventative treatments are the best way to build resistance to medication that you can possibly do. I mean, one, medications are stressful depending on what you're using. You know, if we go back to, I think if we move the clocks back a little bit to probably when I started, it was malachite and formalin was the magical kill-all treatment for everybody. And that would just be spring, autumn, chuck some malachite and formalin in, and everything was great for the year. I can't imagine, that being the case now, because parasites, we are really using very specific medications to treat certain parasites, and some that used to work way back don't. Flukes aside, flukes are one of the biggest problems, full stop at the minute. But I think this is a big issue. Obviously, so formalin and malachite, formalin especially. I mean, it's pretty aggressive stuff, and it's not something I want to be using unless I really, really need to use it. Because if you're giving that to healthy fish, you're going to create stress and potentially create a problem coming out of the treatment when their immune system's took a dip or they've gone through the stress of the medication. And creating a potential problem that wasn't even there in the first place. And then flukes. I mean, it's something where it was a couple of fish vets we're sort of speaking to at the minute about what's actually going on with the fluke situation. But if you ask me, yes, we're seeing resistance in medications. I think from a couple of reasons here. Overuse of treatments, for one, is going to be a problem because they're getting resistant to it. So yeah, medicating when it's not necessary, absolutely not. But then I think another thing, just to go off topic a little bit with that one, is probably under-medicating is becoming a problem as well. So the medication, through either not knowing the correct gallonage or being a little bit too cautious, is leading to, it not 100% doing the job, which is then helping potentially build resistance up. So, I just can't imagine, parasites. And before using any medication, you want to be clear on what you're treating for, having them parasites identified as we would. We scrape and we find a problem, we treat accordingly. Now, obviously, this comes down to, in my opinion, microscopes are a really affordable bit of kit to get your hands on these days. They're as cheap as buying a couple of cheap fish for your pond, and learning how to use it with YouTube and everything else that's around. It's easy. All you need to do is learn how to focus one and take a mucus biopsy, which is really simple. If you stumble across something, you can quickly reference it online or on YouTube, and you know what you're working with then you can consult your dealer. So likewise, I don't know if it's something you offer, Matt, but a lot of dealers do either pond-side visits. Some dealers' premises have controlled setups where you can actually take fish for a mucus biopsy as well, if you're just starting out and you're not confident. So yeah, all of them things should be done, and not just going and getting a bottle of medication and getting that thrown in. That's just not something I'd ever recommend doing.
No, thank you, Ricky. Another one on the subject of bacteria and stuff. Bacteria, Aeromonas.
Yes,
it's always in the altars. Yeah, it is. I had a couple cases this year where they had severe ulcers, literally wiping out the fish, going, within a 24, 48-hour period, big fish going down with ulcers and succumbing to it. What is your view on the rest of the koi that are remaining in that pond? Obviously, they've built up the immune system to it. And I had two beautiful cases actually this year where they had some extremely good fish, nice ponds, but by the time it was identified, they'd lost half of their fish that was in there.
What is your view? Yeah, bacterial problems are horrible, absolutely horrible. I can't think of, for me, in terms of severity of getting a bacterial problem, I'd put it up there over some of the notifiable diseases, like getting KHV. The speed at which it can take stuff out and the level of destruction it can cause and the ongoing problem it can cause is just huge. So, I mean, the bit you come round to, obviously, you speak about is introducing fish into that environment.
Yeah, it's really the big question of whether you introduce fish to it and then potentially those fish are going to come to the same fate because they haven't got immunity, or do you unfortunately have to destroy and start all over again?
Yeah, not a case of destroying. Obviously, unlike the likes of KHV, which obviously even then they can get immunity and actually live with it after the initial burst. With bacterial problems, it's about, you've got to get it right. So a bacterial problem, for a start, it never comes from it doesn't just come out of the blue. So you've got to be looking at your obviously your husbandry, your setup, areas where there can be a lot of organic matter building up. Be careful, obviously, to introduce fish, because you can introduce a bacterial problem quite easily because the fish will carry it. But yeah, when you've actually got the problem, stemming it is a big issue, because really most bacterial problems, full blown, won't be cured without antibiotics. And the method of getting the antibiotics into them, it's either a lot of injections, and generally injecting the whole population, because you can't tend to leave the healthy looking fish at the time untreated, because before you know it, it'll spread to them as well. They're a pain in the arse. You need to get obviously an antibiotic that's hasn't got any resistance to the strain of bacteria that you're treating as well. These things are horrendous. Biggest tip I can give as well, obviously, it's just sort of linking what you're saying. If you've got a bacterial problem, just you need to lock that pond down. No fish in and certainly no fish out. Don't pick up all the healthy ones, move them to another environment, because the likelihood is they're already carrying the problem and they'll just secrete it into the new environment, and it just spreads and it snowballs and it becomes an absolute bitch to get rid of. So yeah, coming back, so if you're at the point where you've had the problem and you're at the end of it and not seeing any new active infections, and it's been like that for a good period of time, you are literally at a point where you've just got to try it. If there's any sign of infection in any of the fish at all, stay well away from introducing new fish, because the new fish literally do become the food for the problem. You know, they'll pick that bacteria level right up. Obviously, as it comes in, the fish gets hit with it like a ton of bricks, because it's got no immunity to what's going in that pond, unlike all the other fish. So it hits it hard. It's probably going to cause an infection, and that infection will help the bacterial levels in the pond rise again. And before we know it, it's party time. So you've got to be very confident you've had a good period of a few months with no issues and infections stopped. And then, yeah, you really have just got to test the water with a fish or two, get them in there and generally see what happens. It's about as much as you can do, but you can reintroduce fish and just carry on as normal after something like that, for sure. What you want to make sure is that you've also eradicated the cause of the problem. Because if that cause was, say, something in the pond where there's an area of organic matter building up and turning sour and you know, constantly causing elevated levels of bacteria in the pond, all that's going to eventually happen is, even though you've slaughtered the fish in the population at that time, the new fish going into that environment, at some point it's all just going to kick off again. So
am I right in thinking then that if you went down with, say, flukes, and you started to do a treatment for flukes, and then you put in through that stress problem again, obviously a treatment, then the bacteria is then going to reappear in that pond because it's always going to be in that pond?
No, not always. I think one of the, again, this isn't my realm. There's fish vets that get into this stuff, but the very basic premise I'm aware of with bacterial infections is there's generally, and this is something that came from the use of probiotics in water, there's generally only ever one food source for bacteria, and you've either got good or bad feeding off of it. And we know food source, whichever group's missing out, cannot sustain. So this is what happens. It's sort of like tipping the scales in the pond. If everything's going well, obviously you're keeping the bad bacteria at bay by overwhelming it with good. Then all of a sudden, if everything takes a turn, we go the other way, and the bacteria is controlling, the bad's controlling the food source and keeping the good bacteria in the pond suppressed. So that's that sort of scales that you need to keep it tipped the right way. So if you're in a good phase where everything's healthy, the environment's healthy, good bacteria is thriving, you're keeping the bad at bay, yeah, you're not just going to have problems. A few flukes are not going to cause the problem to come out again. However, if you're in that environment where it's more negative, so the bad bacteria is thriving, yes, certainly, you know, flukes themselves are a potential cause of a bacterial problem, as we know, because they carry the bacteria on them nasty fang bits they've got going on. So, definitely, but yeah, you're not going to have that problem reoccurring constantly if the environment is healthy. But like I say, if we're on the negative end, small problems are just amplified massively and become huge problems before you know it, because bacteria works at serious speed, certainly when you're at, you know, the warmer water temperatures as well. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I feel for anybody who gets one of them problems, but if you do, get proper help straight away. Do not delay and get proper help.
Yeah, both of these ones in particular, they had actually gone off and got the culture done to identify what the cause was. One of the customers had already reached about just over 1,500 on treatment injections. Wow. I know. And it's always this game, isn't it? You know, and they were concerned, obviously, that adding any fish into the pond, was it going to, and they were advised as well that yes, potentially, you know, that bacteria is going to reappear as soon as you add a new fish. And then they had special fish in the pond, and they didn't want to go and buy a cheap budgie one to drop into the pond to find out whether it would survive or not.
Yeah. And then also if you get the timing wrong with that one, Matt, for sure, you know, you could just be putting fish into it'd be suicidal. But if the time period's right, you know, everything's settled, everything's been settled for a while, and the environment's healthy again, there shouldn't be any problem introducing new fish in there.
Okay, thank you. Skin quality. Obviously, we've all seen the quality of your fish when they come out of your.
Yes.
How is the best way on, especially with us warehouse situations? We don't have a lot of light. Yes, we have external ponds, but a lot of them are in barns or shops or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to maintain that good quality skin?
So daylight is the biggest part of all this. You know, without UV, you're not going to get the pigment cells working. You're just going to basically keep the store getting good pigmentation. Obviously, when we talk about skin quality, we've got the pigmentation quality. You've got the skin luster, which is obviously more related to mucus. You can still create good luster indoors, but you'll lose pigmentation quality through a lack of UV.
I've seen, and I think I've got a couple of people on our group that have got UV lights inside their garages or their sheds, wherever, trying to maintain that UV. Do you think that would actually work?
If they are emitting true UV, it will help. But for me, it's still not going to be any comparison to having full natural daylight in there, and obviously being able to control it if you need to with shading, etc. But you just can't replace it. It's what it does to the whole pond environment. Obviously, we're talking, you know, that UV fuels the algae growth on the side of the pond, which becomes a huge part of the food source. And that part of the diet is another one that helps create the skin quality. It's certainly part of the luster as well. And you can't underestimate what value that adds and how much of that they actually eat on a daily basis as well. So, them indoor systems, unfortunately, I think it takes a lot away that is beneficial to pigmentation development and skin luster overall. So unfortunately I've not got any magic recipe for that one. It is tough. I get it, certainly from koi dealers' perspective, you know, finding premises that do have that full natural daylight, unless you can get something, you know, and build something bespoke like I've got, where everything's been built for purpose. It is tough and it's challenging. Because with pigmentation especially, it's something you're layering it up year on year on year. You know, you're just gaining more thickness till you get to that big fish that's got that ultimate that looks, you know, as thick as it can get sort of colour. That process will be hindered. When you've got the fish indoors, if it gets lost, which it will do, the longer they're in there, you can pull that back. You know, time outside with UV, it'll pull it back, but it will set it behind from a fish that's had full sort of UV, been on that trajectory from day one.
I think the trick is for us distributors, that is to only make sure we buy good quality fish from you that we don't hold on to for more than a week.
Something like that. It's tough. I've been there myself, you know, at my dad's, when we was at the shop, you know, one of the main koi rooms we built as an extension had absolutely no daylight. It was a pain in the arse. We used to actually cycle between, you know, moving the stock around. After a period of time, we'd take it back to the off-site facility to give it some time for that colour just to come back, so it didn't sink too far in. But daylight is absolutely paramount in achieving ultimate skin condition, and not just for the pigment cells, just for the whole environment and what that then produces to help the process. But like I say, it's not lost. It can soon come back. If you spent 2 or 3 years indoors, I mean, you can actually see it sometimes because the pigment cells sit in the middle of the scale. So obviously what's happening is year on year, that's dispersing out either side of the scale to gain the thickness of the colour until you get the uniformity. What can tend to happen when you cut the UV out is it actually goes the other way. So it actually starts retreating back towards the scale, but there will come a point where you'll break that if it's left too long. Which, interestingly, and this is something I've seen in the past as well. So a lot of people use polycarbonate on roofs and in fish houses and stuff like that. I'm not too clued up on the subject, but I do know polycarbonate cuts a lot of UV out. So it's still letting the light through, but cuts a lot of UV. And I've seen fish kept in that environment, and they've looked very similar to fish that have been kept in the dark a little bit, or without that direct sunlight.
Yeah, so that would play a big part this time of the year then, in the winter, where everybody's got polycarbonate sheets over their ponds to keep them nice and warm. They're basically in the dark.
Yeah, even, you know, the sheets I use on the greenhouses are just plain visqueen. There's absolutely no thing. It's just full UV straight through it. And that way I've got the roofing. It's just a plain corrugated sheeting again that doesn't interfere with UV. You know, if you want it, you can control it with shading. But yeah, polycarb, I've seen that on more than one occasion where permanently kept in that sort of environment has caused, you can just see it, the pigment to start retreating a little bit. So
I can see tomorrow morning everybody's going to be turning on the heaters and ripping off their polycarbonate covers.
It's tough. It's always it's all a balancing act. In that, you know, I even decided I don't cover the ponds inside the fish houses. I mean, ultimately, obviously, they're in a greenhouse, so that is like a big cover over everything. But you know, when I first put the heating system on last year, the team had gone covering all the ponds over with frames and polythene over the top. And yeah, I mean, you saw it in no time. It was algaeing up. So obviously then the algae was cutting the UV, just another layer of something to get through. And I noticed it too much. For one, I just didn't enjoy it. You can't visually inspect the fish the same way when you're pulling the cover back and you've only got so much of the pond to look at. But yeah, it wasn't for me. And that daylight's so important. Even to the point this time of year right now, just through the changing daylight hours, there's several fish amongst my Deutsche collection, for example. I've noticed the pigmentation softening slightly, and that's the only bit I can put it down to, is that obviously it's not getting the level of UV it's typically been getting. So you can see
this time of year, then when the daytime temperatures are good, it'd be wise to take off your polycarb and let the UV get to the fish. And then
Absolutely, yeah, without a doubt. And that's obviously good for everything, you know, getting some gas exchange in and all the rest of it. So, yeah, happy days.
Talking colour, luster, and all the rest, what fish would you say, or variety, would you say you have the best percentage of failures or positive, as in you've spotted them as a grow on? Which one would you say is the biggest one that's going to lose all its colour and go the opposite way or improve?
Interestingly, I mean, probably the biggest group is Deutsche fish, because we've just not got the same mechanisms to read the fish as I have with scaled fish. So take Go Sankey as the category. Go Sankey, Wagoi type, fully scaled, you know, there's mechanisms in the skin. So just like we talk about the pigmentation within the scales that I can look at. I can use the Kiwa and especially the sachet to get a read on what's happening, the colour uniformity as well. There's just a lot there I can use as tools to predict where that fish is going to head. Hence why, like with the Dainichi fish, I'm prepared to spend so much on them little fish and raise them, because I'm very confident with all the experience I've got at reading them and what the fish give me back. I can see clearly where they're going, and yeah, the success rate was massive. You know, the amount of colour drop off was so few. I think it was 2 or 3 fish altogether. So on raising a batch of Tosa, it's pretty incredible. When you flip that to Deutsche, so Sankey, however, I haven't got those mechanisms. There is no sachet. Yeah, the colour's a lot harder to read, and it's, to be honest, it's one of the hardest fish I could probably, if you wanted me to teach you the best way to select Tosa, Go Sankey, I could teach you very quickly. Deutsche, not so much. It just becomes a thing that over years, I just get to know just from looking and get the feeling of that one's going to do well, that one's not. But even then, you know, I can have the most promising looking fish, and before you know it, you come one day and the colour's just vanished. They really are crazy. So yeah, Deutsche, and then that Deutsche sort of runs out. You know, if you look at Deutsche Chiba, Deutsche Harawaki, all of them types of varieties, it's just very, very tough raising them from Tosa. And you know, the breeders, I do feel for the breeders that are producing them fish, because yeah, they can just devastate you at times. You've got the most stunning fish in front of you, and before you know it, it's just become nothing.
Now, this question is going to be a bit controversial for you. English and Japanese koi, bred from first-line Japanese parents in Japan, or bred here in England or the UK. What makes a difference? what is the difference between a Japanese fish and an English fish when both the parents are Japanese?
Yes, that's a very, very good point, man. No, I'm with you on this one. And again, hats off the English guys out there that are doing this. You know, hats off. I get, there's a reason I stay away from breeding. There's a lot of people mention, why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? Yeah, could, happy days. I just wouldn't choose to, because I mean the English guys are up against it, because even when they do produce, you know, something of real quality, because it's not got that Japanese tag, it can't fetch the same kind of prices. It's them high-end fish that, you know, they help pump back into the system with a Japanese farm. So, you know, hats off to what they do. And yeah, you know, the fish are looking better and better every year from what I see them guys. But yeah, coming back to your question, it is the experience. That is the bit. We're talking decades and decades and decades of experience that gets passed down through them generations. And just the environment itself in Japan, there's so much, it's a community that works together. There's so much experience that they can all draw from. You know, if we look at Nagoshi, has just popped to mind, to be honest. So Nagoshi, the young lad there, Masaki, he's went off and served his apprenticeship at Matsue. You know, what a place to go and work at. Absolute elite Kohaku breeder himself's got generations of knowledge there. That's where he goes and serves an apprenticeship and learns his craft before coming back to his farm, drawing from then his dad's experience and what he's learned at Matsue, bringing it all together. Yeah, it's just a huge pool of information and knowledge out there that they are all sharing constantly. There's little things they'll try and keep behind, but you know, if one of them wants to learn how to produce a variety, they'll go and ask the guy who they all know is really good at doing it, and he'll happily tell them how to do it. You know, I don't think outside of Japan you see that culture that much. You know, it's more a case of, well, how did you do that? It's more a case of, yeah, being shown the middle finger than actually openly sharing that information and knowledge. And that's what's paramount to people learning and everything growing. So you've got that, obviously, availability of parent fish. And I think the biggest thing, and this is probably it's the level of investment sometimes in parent fish and the understanding of real quality. Because if you don't truly understand real quality at the highest level, and then the bloodlines that go into making it, I don't believe you can get that to truly filter down into the fish that you're producing.
So you think is it the environment then which is a major factor of it, or is it the
environment out there just breeding? It's like I said, the open availability of knowledge, and it's, you know, you're getting parent fish and line just passed down. It's just this, the daft things, and it's the perseverance as well. If we look at, so obviously at the beginning of the video I mentioned about Taniguchi and the golden corn, 12 years. 12 years he's been producing. He's had a vision in his head, which fair enough, just having that vision and even fathoming out how you're going to get there is just incredible. There's a serious amount of knowledge and experience there just to think, I like that, I'm going to do it, but what do I have to put together? Because you can't just go out there like Kohaku and get two nice Kohaku from two breeders and put them together and get Kohaku. He's not done that with what's happened there. And yeah, I mean, I just can't see that you'd get 12 years of investment into one thing like that. I think most people would have given up.
So tell us a bit about that 12 years then. Was that 12 years with just a single parent?
No. It seems so. There was three sets. So the original pairing, I believe, was his Chagoi and Ginrin Asagi. Then he's produced a fish from that, which has been paired again with something. And then he's got down to sort of the third pairing along before he's got any sort of stability and sort of output of what he was looking for.
And then he's bred again from those offspring, or he's...
Yeah, this is it. And that's obviously when he starts getting his stability and the consistency in the traits and what he's looking for. But you just look at that whole scene, Matsunosuke, when years back when they crossed the Magoi blood into Sankey. I remember it was an article that I read all that time back. It fascinated me that guy spent, the best part of 20 years stabilizing that one bloodline for Sankey.
It's mad, isn't it?
And that back then, you think of the enormity of that. You've got Sankey, which on the gene tree is so far over from the original Magoi. You've decided to go and put that original fish back in. You can just imagine the mayhem it caused introducing a black carp back into, a really refined variety at that point. and where to go with it. And you've only generally always got that one shot every year. So your decision making has got to be right.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think just that general pull, but understanding quality, you saw that, you know, you can get the knowledge of breeding quite easily and know what put together to make a variety. But truly understanding quality is understanding then what's coming out in your offspring. It's even just learning the selection process. You know, the guys over here haven't got, you know, that field of people just to go out to. They can't just go and spend a year working, you know, at some other breeders. It's just generally not going to happen. So yeah, and obviously it's such a family thing when coming through in them generations. I say it's quite easy to send a lad off, like happened at Nogami, for example. You know, he got sent off to Dainichi under the late Minoru Mano and spent 16 years there as an apprentice, and then came back and started on the family farm. So yeah, it's crazy.
Well, with your inroads into the breeders in Japan, have you considered doing a tour and taking customers and clients over to Japan?
So I already do, but it's always, yeah, I'm not the most planned and organised on the trips normally. It's sort of, yeah, as and when we can sort of squeeze it in and pack my case and vanish. But yeah, it's always there. Well, I'm happy, obviously, to take my dealers around if it's something that they're looking to do. And yeah, if they've got guests who are accompanying them, it can be arranged for sure. Yeah, great place. Something everybody should see. Yeah, definitely.
It's been a good experience. I had a question come in from one of our customers on our Facebook group.
Yeah.
With my super hard borehole water with a pH of 8.7, what's your thoughts on reverse osmosis? I know we touched on it earlier on, and has he any experience with it? I know over time the levels in the pond drop, and his pH is now 7.9. So is it better to simply sit tight or work instead of looking at
how are his fish doing?
Good. Yeah, they're fine. It's a new pond that we installed this year. The ammonia and nitrite, the bacteria, took some time to get going. But yeah, the fish are doing fine.
So the fish are doing great. And what's he looking to achieve with the fish? Just keep a nice collection, keep them happy and healthy?
Yeah, just steady growth on them. You know, believe it or not, before they had the pond put in, which is a stunning pond, they only had goldfish, 3 little goldfish in the front garden, and they're taking the plunge into the koi world.
This is where quickly, so them fish will live in that environment perfectly happy. You look after your environment, keep the parameters stable, look after it all. The fish will live in there happily. They'll still grow. They'll do well. I don't foresee him having any issues at all. So why the hell would you want to go pissing around with it all, to be blunt about it? You're just going to cause yourself a massive headache, add a load of cost, add something you need to monitor, really keep on top of, even more so than with the environment he's currently got. So I just cannot see the point of interfering with that at all.
I think not this customer in particular, but I think a lot of people, they read too much and they see it on different forums, and people panic and they have this perceived, like the pH, they want a 7.2, they want the KH of
this is again what it really gets my goat, this, because it then makes koi keeping such a task, a chore. It adds a level of complexity that you just don't need. You know, what are you looking to get out of it? Don't get me wrong, I'll say it, in that really hard water, I have seen it age fish slightly, you know, looking like they're getting, you know, just a year in front of themselves from a skin perspective. But there's so much more to all of that. You know, what's the level of fish that's involved here? And there's just so many other things that, you know, will affect that skin as well. You know, he can have that, a really happy, healthy pond, everything great. And then, you know, you've got somebody who could be running RO but completely abusing the system.
Yeah.
You're still going to end up fucking things up there. So it's always a bigger picture for me. You can't just hone in on that one thing. But the biggest thing, you know, in his pH, as you'll know as well, stability is the key with pH. Koi live in a big range, but they hate swings. Absolutely hate swings, but will live perfectly in them higher ranges if there's stability to it.
I think stability on everything, on all the ranges, temperature, pHs, KHs, is the main one that really affects the well-being of the fish. You know, big fluctuations in temperature can have exactly the same detrimental effect on the fish as a hardness or the pH. So keep it stable, leave it alone.
Absolutely. So this is it's all about what you're looking to get out of it. But I will not have anybody come to me either and say, in order to grow koi successfully and raise them, you need to be running RO. Sorry, absolute load of bollocks, that one.
Yeah.
And until my fish start growing and I start struggling, then I will stand by that one. But there's just so much more to it. And I do believe, you know, a lot can be gained from the forums, from experience, but all I see is, and I've seen it constantly, a lot of the time they do more harm than good. You know, there's a lot of false, just social media in general, you know, there's a lot of false reality on it that can make you feel really shitty. Like, you know, what you've got's not good enough, what you're doing is not good enough. It's just not the case. You know, koi keeping is easy, it's simple, it can be done on a budget as well. I won't have any say. We're actually, you know, we're looking at electricity costs at the minute. It being a big, obviously, it's a big topic. We're just working on putting together my actual running costs for my first greenhouse, which runs 10 ponds in there. And I've got a sneaky suspicion, with obviously the heating out of the equation, because I do run that off of oil, but with just the electricity running costs, I've got a sneaky feeling I'll be running those 10 ponds probably for less than a lot of people run one pond for. You know, so again, when I'm seeing out there, there's going to be all these pond clubs, and you just got to look at what you're doing and you see what's out there and get the right advice.
Advice.
That's why it's good having you on. Keep it simple, guys. Keep it simple.
That's why it's good. Exactly. That's why it's good having you on here, Ricky. You know, hear it from the horse's mouth, and we can all come back to you. It touches it really. You know, I just look at, you know, what we do, the amount of fish you've seen it, the amount of fish I sit on, I'm looking after, and it's not a big effort for us. And obviously, that's a lot of experience sat there, but likewise, we keep everything so simple. Yeah, definitely. That's good advice. Keep it simple.
It is easy life.
I could go on all night. I've got so many questions. Do you want more?
Yeah, no. Let's go with one more, Matt, and then I'm gonna get. I just saw my the family's cropped up earlier, so maybe before bedtime.
Again, catching on to the forums, depth of water.
Yes.
You know, obviously, there's a big one. You always see different comments. It's got to be 5 feet. It's got to be 4 feet. It's got to be this. You know, equally, I've seen fish survive perfectly well in 2 feet of water and frozen over during the winter months, and the fish come out of it healthy as well in the spring. You know, your advice, what would you say to have on the depth?
I would say there is drawbacks to having it excessively shallow. Obviously, it does come with a few more risks, although they will live in it, and there's drawbacks to having it excessively deep. And absolutely, on the depth thing, having excessive depth is absolutely pointless, because you gain water volume, yes, but I just don't think it's necessary. You know, we should be looking at all the ways to possibly gain as much surface area as possible. For me, I've not got a pond up there on site that is. I've got some at 4 feet deep, but they only run at 3.5 generally with the water level. And you just don't. I can't see any need for a pond to go above sort of 5 feet deep. Just cannot. I cannot see the point in it. And likewise, too shallow. Just don't.
If we want a forum now, I think there'll be a lot of people. I think a lot of people will be screaming at us, you know, even saying that, because you do read so many places. It's got to be excess of 4 feet, 5 feet, ideally. You know, and you can see the benefits of it.
I don't know where all these rules come from. If someone can tell me why it's beneficial for fish or koi to have a pond sort of over 5 foot deep, I'd love to hear it, because I can't think of a single reason as to why it's actually needed, other than to produce more water volume. But you know, the excessive depths, it's quite commonly known it can be linked to swim bladder problems and putting more pressure on the fish, certainly when they get bigger. So no, don't see the need for it there, Matt. And it's shallow's not a problem, but you know, shallow can be riskier. Sort of in summer, you know, it's going to be quite obvious. Summer and springs, you're going to have the bigger fluctuations because it's going to warm up so much more in the day and drop off a lot faster. And in winter, yes, you know, if you're uncovered and not taking preventions, it could really chill it down excessively just through having a smaller volume of water more than anything. So yeah, somewhere nicely in the middle, sort of like 3 foot is a great average depth. Going down to no more than 5 for me. If you're in that range, happy days.
Perfect. Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, pleasure speaking to you, mate. And yeah, crack on and get them ponds done. Because you're taking up quite a lot of space at my fish house at the minute, rather than fishing boat.
I knew you were going to say that at some point. I had the message the other day come through saying, "Are you ready to take them?" And I was like, "You are joking." No, not yet.
Yeah, I'll be on your back before long, mate. Get laying them blocks.
Super. Thanks, Ricky.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Cheers. Good speaking to you, Matt. All right. Right, guys. Yeah, that's gone on longer than I expected. So, yeah, unfortunately, I have got to shoot. Again, we'll keep record of all the questions and possibly pull them up some other time. Thanks for everybody who's tuned in. I hope, again, you've gained some value out of that. And I look forward to seeing you all next week, along with the guests we've got lined up. So, yeah, thanks again.